Greetings, folks, and welcome to the Electromaker podcast. This week is a quite special show because we just had so many Electromaker-specific things to fit into it. We announced the winners of the Eurocircuits PCB design contest that's been happening over the last 3 months. We also announced the Electromaker of the Month, which is our monthly contest that has been running every month this year, as well as talking about Maker Faire Rome. I think this works relatively well as a podcast, but Maker Faire Rome was obviously a very visual event, and so you might want to watch that section on the YouTube show. Right up top as well, I'd like to ask you the question. We had a lot of interviews filmed at Maker Faire Rome, and it did occur to me that it might make a nice podcast episode all of its own to just string those interviews one after the other in audio format, and maybe just kind of briefly give little introductions and outros to each section as an audio thing. So if any of you listening to the podcast would like that, please do get in touch. As always, the Discord server is a good place to do it, or you can get in touch with us on Twitter, or you can email me at ian@electromaker.io. All of those things will work equally well. Right up at the start of the show here as well, rather than in the middle, I'll just say, if you want to support this podcast, head to electromaker.io and look at our shop. We stock everything from Arduino and Raspberry Pi through to MG Chemicals and things like Nordic Semiconductor, who do kind of professional grade Bluetooth Low Energy and various other development kits. We have a lot in stock right now, and if you're thinking of starting a project, maybe head there. Anyway, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Now, up first this week, we are going to talk about the Eurocircuits PCB design contest. It's something I've mentioned a lot over the previous little while, and that's because it's been our major contest that's been happening on Electromaker. And in case you are not familiar with it, here's a quick reminder of what it was. So, in very brief, the idea behind this contest was, at the very start, people would pitch ideas for PCBs that they could get printed to be part of a project that they had imagined, thought of, wanted to prototype. And in the early stages of the contest, the application phase, people would put their PCB design files up for evaluation. And provided the PCB made sense and had all the bits that fitted into it and it wasn't going to be a problem, a selection of those was passed on to Eurocircuits, which is a PCB fabricator right here in Europe, and they would make those PCBs up to a value of €500. Next was the project build stage, which is an 8-week phase where the people that got their PCBs back from Eurocircuits had to put them into a project, get that project working to the best extent they could, and then document it all here on the Electromaker website. Now, we had an expert panel of judges for this contest. Firstly, Kees Ravenberg, who is the co-founder of Marsa Engineering, and secondly, Francesco Volpe, who is a professor at the Technische Hochschule Aschaffenburg and a semiconductor consultant. Now, I'm not going to go through all of the criteria of judging right here because it's quite long, but as you can see, project innovation and creativity was one of the things that they were thinking about. How well it was documented was another. Whether there was video or not, the bill of materials, whether the bill of materials was complete, and things like well-structured code, all that kind of stuff. If you are interested, by the way, in finding out any of this, the contest page is still up, and down at the bottom here is the rules, the judging, all of that kind of stuff. But as you can see here, these winners for the top 3 places and the Sustainability Award have been chosen. And we're going to go into those in just a moment. But as you can probably see, if I wasn't quite so in the way, we have first, second, and third place just here, and we have the Sustainability Prize winner just here. However, you may notice that we actually had 4 prizes. We had first, second, third, Sustainability, and a social prize of €250. So before we look at the projects that have already won, there is one more prize to give out, and that is the Social Media Prize, which is unsurprisingly chosen via social media. Although, to be fair, it's not really social media, it's a Google form, and you can find a link to that in the description of this video. Over the next few days, you, the Electromaker community, will pick your favorite project out of the list, and the one with the most votes will win the €250 Social Media Prize. So, the Google Forms link will be in this video, it'll be on our social media, head over there and vote. But now, let's look at the winners that have already been announced. In third place, winning €400, was eFarm KJSCE with their Smart Valve project. The Smart Valve is a fully contained irrigation system for smart farming and smart agriculture. It's a really nice idea. The board itself runs LoRa, so it has long-range communication, which means as well as actually working independently, which it can do because it has a soil moisture sensor on board, and when it sees that the soil is not moist enough, it opens the valve, which is the other part of this, a motor controller. And it can work completely independently, but it can also send those soil moisture readings to the cloud, and because it is connected to the cloud, it also means that if this is, say, somewhere out in the middle of a field, a farmer can decide to override the system and turn the water on anyway by the push of a button. What really made this special is that it's very, very low powered, because the MCU that is being used, which is the same ATmega328P you'll find in Arduinos, is in low power mode for most of the time. But it is also powered by a battery bank, which is being charged by a solar panel with battery management on board. So it's a complete little unit. It really is something that is only a few steps away from being something that could be deployed into smart agriculture today. And it is absolutely worth the third position that it's got. Congratulations, eFarm KJ SCE. I'm assuming from your username that this is an ongoing project that is going to get better and better, and you're an absolutely deserving third place winner. In second place, we had Aeon with the Smart DAC system. Now, this is a high-precision reader that can send data to the cloud in real time for sharing that data with other scientists and researchers without any barriers of time zone or anything like that. It's a really awesome project. Aeon's Smart DAC PCB is a wonderful little bit of kit. It is a precision measurement unit, and in fact, you can see it in the project here being used with a piece of smart asphalt, another invention from Aeon, to take readings from this piece of asphalt and upload them in as close to real time as possible to the cloud. When you're uploading anything to the cloud, real time is very difficult, but the idea is that this project can be, this data, can be put on the Dataverse, which we'll come on to in a moment, and then taken in real time by other researchers who might be wanting to use the data that you're collecting as part of your experiments. Now, the Dataverse is a open source repository, not dissimilar to a code repository, but for scientific data. This is something that was developed at Harvard, and Harvard use a lot of experiments that happen at Harvard have all of their stuff on the Dataverse. And the idea is this board allows you to upload directly to the Dataverse. The data goes from the experiment onto the Dataverse and is immediately available and open to everyone. The idea of the Dataverse itself is fascinating and a subject for another time. But in the context of this competition, the Smart DAC is a wonderful piece of kit and an absolutely deserving second place. Congratulations, Aeon. Before announcing the overall winner, it's time for the Sustainability Prize, and this time it was won by Daniel Mantioni with his Easy Flash cartridge for Commodore 64. Now, the Easy Flash system for Commodore 64 software is well known, but this particular cartridge was special because it uses a much lower bill of materials. You can use older cartridges to fit it into, and it was made and developed and even created entirely, where possible, entirely within Europe, harking back to a time when there was actually a computer production industry here in Europe. The Easy Flash 1CR cartridge for Commodore 64 project from Daniel Mantioni is something that is quite special for anyone who's into retro computing. Obviously, the Commodore 64 is still a very loved computer, but this is the perfect example of trying to take something that already exists and making it smaller and more local and use less materials. The Easy Flash software needs to be put onto a cartridge in order to play modern software and indie games that are being developed for the Commodore 64, among other things. And this project uses a smaller bill of materials than other projects that are similar to it, but also, as you see from the video on the page here from where they've been making it, they've done everything they can to make it a European project. Back in the days where 8-bit computers were being made, Europe had a huge computer industry, but not long after that it sort of fell apart. And the idea here is we can actually still do things locally by getting the PCBs fabricated right here in Europe, courtesy of Eurocircuits, and where possible, there has to be a few exceptions with the world as it is right now, use components and things designed here in Europe, and of course reuse things where possible too. So yeah, this project does use less materials than similar efforts. It's compatible with already existing C64 cartridge cases manufactured mostly in Europe. Congratulations, Daniel. You have won the €500 Sustainability Prize. The top prize for the Eurocircuits PCB contest was €1,000, and that was won by Alistair with Trundlebot, a learning project using the Raspberry Pi Pico and very simple parts to make a two-wheeled robot that moves around on a nice little felt pad. Now, Trundlebot is special for a number of reasons. The first is that it actually takes a slightly different approach to many other PCB designs. The PCB is simple by design, and that is because it is for people who are learning the very basics of electronics. Everything that's difficult to put on the PCB comes already assembled. All you need to do is solder on the PCB connectors, and while that can be a little bit tricky, it is perfect soldering practice. It uses a Raspberry Pi Pico, so obviously it is very easy to program, but not only that, Alistair created a custom library for programming the robot, making it very easy to use. This is exactly what you need when you have beginner programmers. At the end of the day, if you want kids to get into coding, you want to have results, and seeing a robot move around on the table is one of those results. Other things that the judges liked is the fact that it had a very simple bill of materials. The stepper motors that in this project are the ones that you find in most MCU starter kits. The chassis is very easy to make. You could even hand make it out of a piece of acrylic, and all of the 3D printed parts are very simple and very small. By having a piece of felt instead of a front wheel, you cut out on another thing that you would need to buy. There's a lot about this project that was clearly very well thought out. The custom PCB takes care of the stepper motors and also the Raspberry Pi Pico, and adds a reset button, something that the Pi Pico is lacking as standard, but it also has a few extra things you can attach to it. There's points for attaching an LDR if you wanted to add some self-driving nous to your robot, and stepper motors if you wanted to add a grabber or some other part to it. It's an extendable project, it's a perfect learning project, and it comes together almost like a kit that has been designed for production. It's a really, really good, really nicely put together thing, and a deserving overall winner. So congratulations, Alistair. So once again, congratulations and thank you to everyone that was a part of this contest, especially to Eurocircuits and our expert judges, without whom this of course would not be possible at all. If you are considering getting a PCB made, do consider Eurocircuits, because you don't always have to send off to cheap fab houses in China. You can get this stuff done relatively close to home, of course depending on where you're watching this from. And if you would like to know more about any of the projects that you just saw, there is a blog post I wrote up which encapsulates all of the winners so far, and you can find that in the link to this video, linked in the description of this video as well. With a quick write-up of each one and links to all of the different projects as well. And right now the community page here at Electromaker is full of these projects. If you look through, you will find a lot of those projects that have just come through. It's really worth doing, because if you look for the ones which are, clearly part of the contest and have a read through, it'll give you a really good idea what you might want to choose when you go to vote for the social prize. As well as in the description of this video, there is a link to the social prize form down here at the bottom of this blog post. And as it says here, midnight on Tuesday the 25th of October is when this will close. So that's midnight UK time. For me, that's 1 in the morning. But yes, midnight UK time, Tuesday 25th of October. And there's a link to the voting form just here. And like I say, if you've had a quick read through all of the projects on the project page, you'll have a much better time when you come here to pick whichever one you want to win. But that about wraps it up for the Eurocircuits PCB contest. Apart from the social media prize, which we will be announcing in the next week at some point, that is kind of it. Just once again, thank you to everyone involved. This has been such a fantastic contest. It's been such a different way of doing things. We've had many contests with development kits that have been incredible. We've always had a very high standard of entries into our contests, but this one was a little bit different. And honestly, I had no idea quite how it would go, and the level of involvement and the level of complexity and all of this kind of stuff has just been through the roof. It's been a real joy. So thank you to everyone that was involved, and I cannot wait for our next contest. So after several weeks of talking about it and pushing it and convincing people to try and enter, it is now time for us to give away the LattePanda 3 Delta. And if there sounds like there's a little bit of sad resignation in my voice, it's because I really don't want to give this little single board computer away. I've had a few conversations with people about it since I got it, some of whom are fans of the show, some of whom are other content creators, some of whom are just fans of single board computers. And it seems like across the board, this has been received as one of the better SBCs recently. I know some people have some squabbles about the price, but in terms of x86 SBCs, yeah, I've really had a lot of fun with this. However, all of that fun has now been erased and reset so that this can be sent out to our winner, and it is now time to announce that winner. Now, just before I do, I'd like to say thank you to everyone that entered. This is by far the biggest response to a contest we've had so far. There were well over 150 entries across all of our different platforms, and I'm very glad that we were picking this prize randomly, because otherwise, it would have been very, very difficult to pick a prize winner based on merit, but we just did this completely at random. But before I say the name of the prize winner, I just want to point out that this is one of many giveaways we have coming up. In fact, between now and Christmas, we're going to be having a veritable Christmas of Electromaker giveaways, because there's a huge amount of amazing stuff that we want to give away to our community, some of which you'll have seen on the show before, some of which is a little bit secret, some of which is very, very new stuff that's only just been released that you won't have your hands on unless you were in a certain place at a certain time, like Maker Faire Rome perhaps. But now let's see who the winner is of the LattePanda 3 Delta. Uli S, congratulations, you were the winner of the LattePanda 3 Delta. This was an amazing contest. I'm very sad to be giving this board away, but Uli, whatever you do with this board, please do document it on the Electromaker website. Whether you just make a web server out of it, whether you just mess around with it to use it as a little Windows computer, maybe you're going to turn this into a NAS. I don't know what your plans are, but I'd love to hear them. So that is the end of this contest, but as I mentioned, we have so many more contests coming up in the end of this year. I will be giving details of those in the coming weeks. Thank you to everyone who supports the show. Thank you to everyone who has commented on all of the videos. I know the promise of free stuff really does help, but the fact that enough people new to comment on the videos is showing that people are watching the show and people are enjoying it, and I'm very glad to hear that. So yes, congratulations Uli once again, and let's get on with the rest of the show. Hey folks, this is Future Ian here. I realized while editing this that there was one important thing I didn't mention. Uli's comment says, after trying on Twitter, I will try it here as well. I just wanted to make it clear that whenever we noticed there was a duplicate entry, i.e. someone who'd said on Twitter or on TikTok and on YouTube, where possible, obviously it's not possible to do this with every single one because people have different usernames, but where we could work out who was who, we made sure there was no duplicate entry so everyone had an equal chance to win, so that the randomizer could be as random as it could be, as much as randomness can exist in the world. I hope I explained that okay. Now, anyone that follows Electromaker in any capacity will know that we've been at Maker Faire Rome. We were very excited about it before we went, we were very excited about it before we were there, and the wash of video content you have seen on both social media and our YouTube channel with fantastic projects and interviews is evidence that it was a wonderful event. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it now and show you a little bit of extra footage and stuff that we gathered from the event. But before I do, I would just like to thank everyone who was involved in Maker Faire Rome for making us feel so welcome, for helping us with any problems we had. It's exhausting enough being at an event where you have to try and be on the entire time, make videos and write things up and work very quickly, and to do that obviously in a foreign country can be a little bit intimidating when you don't speak any of the language. However, we were very well looked after from start to finish, and I'm really looking forward to coming back next year to doing it all again. Anyway, without any further ado, let's have a quick talk about what we saw and all the things that made Maker Faire Rome 2022 so special. So Maker Faire Rome was a lot of fun, and in fact we do have blog posts that cover the roundup that I'm going to give now, but I also just wanted to sort of say it and put some video footage there. Most of the video footage that you're seeing is taken from the separate YouTube videos you can find on the Electromaker channel, which include interviews and some of the things we saw. But one of the things that isn't there is the tokamak. Now this was a huge thing. This was inside one of the old gas storage container things. As you're seeing, it's very difficult to get it all on camera. There's a couple of good photos we took of it, but essentially it's meant to mimic the inside of a new form of fusion reactor. This is magnetic confinement fusion, something that's been worked on since the middle of the 20th century, basically, and they're still trying to perfect it. And one of their major sponsors of Maker Faire Rome put this massive art installation up. It's a collaboration between Italo Rota and the Carlo Ratti Association. Being inside it was amazing. It was a little bit weird for us because it was all, of course, in Italian, and you're shown around with various television screens, and we didn't understand any of it. But it was an incredible thing to be inside of and around, and it was an amazing centerpiece to the Maker Faire. But beyond that, everyone you would expect to find there was there. Arduino were there, and they had all of their stuff on display, but also during Maker Faire they announced their new Make Your Uno board, which is, well, it's not a board, it's a kit. It's a kit with all through-hole components, which allows you to build an Arduino Uno yourself, and it also has a shield which has a bunch of potentiometers and a little speaker on it, which can work as a kind of synthesizer. And we were lucky enough to speak to Massimo Banzi, the head of Arduino, who is such a lovely guy. I haven't approached him about it yet, but at some point I'm hoping to get him on the podcast just to have a chat, because he was very gracious with giving us his time, and the full interview you can find on the YouTube channel. But beyond that, there was some kind of interesting stuff on show from people like ST, for example. They had a metaverse assisted cap, which essentially was a sensor box that was fitted on top of a cap that allowed you to kind of move your head, and it would track your head quite precisely. It's essentially an inertial measurement unit in there, but it has some clever AI things going on under the hood as well. I don't know if I understood it wrong as to whether it's just using AI to detect whether the device is being used or not, so it can put it into a low power state to not waste battery, or whether there's something improving movement pickup. It's something I'll have to look into later. They also had a very interesting sorting machine using an STM32 and the ST Spin G4 driver board. And this was essentially all in one board, which had 2 motor drivers on it. And it also had a little Edge AI camera set up. And the thing that you're looking at now is the color sensing crane thing. It had a little electromagnet. It had some balls that were being moved around. When you put a ball right in front of the camera, it would pick it up and put it back in the correct spot. It was quite a cool thing to see. And it was quite an interesting thing as well, because the board isn't a development board. They just made what would be a useful kind of idea for a board. They designed this PCB and fabricated it and said, look, this is the kind of thing that you could make using these parts, which is kind of interesting, because a lot of these trade shows you see development boards or you see just the silicon itself. This is quite an interesting implementation. On the general walk around, there's some quite interesting stuff as well. There was, of course, robot football, which is always very, very popular. And there was one thing I found fascinating was a ship, like a sailing ship. Now, one of my parents used to be a sailing instructor, and I've sailed a lot, and so I was quite excited to find a random boat in the middle of everything. And yeah, this is a recycling project. Again, this is something that I hope to write up at some point in the future. In short, this is designed to be a sustainable boat made out of experimental materials. It's a team of around 90 students doing it, and they're making new recycled materials. It's a little bit beyond my understanding. I don't really very good at material science, but yes. So there was that, and another kind of interesting but not directly Maker thing was the chemical depolarization setup at the Formula DT stand. They are going for a patent for a room temperature, room pressure way of breaking down PET, whichever, or polyethylene, or whichever plastic it is. Again, not my area of expertise, but it was very interesting. We don't have an interview with him, but there was a short video that was up on our TikTok, which I can play just now. I am here at the Formula DT stand at Maker Faire 2022, and while this isn't the usual thing that we cover at Electromaker, stay with me. Depolymerization. Yes, it's more exciting than you think. Because this is a device that allows for depolymerization, which is what you need to recycle plastics, something that is essential in our modern world, but it is a chemical process rather than a mechanical one. Nowadays, when you put your plastic in the bin, it will get recycled, but it is a very harsh process. It is a process that requires a lot of mechanization. This requires just one motor. It happens at room temperature and at room pressure, and it is the work of a startup called Formula DT. The project is called RePET. You can head to the link in our bio to find some more about it. But yeah, this really struck us as something that is not only visually something that's quite cool to look at, but this is really the kind of project that is going to allow recycling to be more effective in the future, which is something that in the end we really should all be caring a lot more about. We also chatted briefly with a company called Airkino, and we had a quick interview with them. And what they essentially have are very ruggedized, or they have indoor and outdoor versions of the same thing. They are air quality sensors that are supposed to be cheap and very easy to use, and that has an online dashboard. The idea being that you could use many of these things and get aggregate data of air quality. And the idea is that they can deploy these in lots of places and get independent air quality readings from different places in cities. And it's as I mentioned at the time to them, it's kind of interesting because one of the winners of one of our previous contests did exactly this using a development kit in their home city in Bangladesh. Now, of course, the Raspberry Pi stand was a buzz. In fact, when we first got there on the first day, we couldn't really get near it for a while, but they did bring a lightsaber, to be fair. Again, there's a short interview with Toby, who is the new maker in residence at Raspberry Pi, and he's been making some wonderful things. Again, we had a quick interview with him at Maker Faire. I'd love to have a longer chat with him at some point. I'm sure that will happen. But it was very nice to spend a little time with Toby and Liz, and just generally see the buzz that always surrounds the Raspberry Pi stand. And they had lots of nice little things made with Raspberry Pi Picos and Pico Ws. They had a bunch of Pi 400s on display there, and as you can imagine, it was a very popular place. But what was quite exciting is that they were sharing their stand with Melopero, who are a third-party seller, an Italian Pi reseller. They're an authorized reseller, I should say, they're not third party. And they were releasing their Cookie RP2040 board that day. Now, the Cookie RP2040, again, I've written a full blog article on it. We interviewed them about it, but essentially it's a circuit playground form factor board, which looks, not similar to the Adafruit circuit playground boards, but it has a matrix of LEDs in the middle, a USB-C connection, and a way of connecting stemmer and extra things to it. It just was really really interesting to see that, and they did give us one, which we will be getting onto in the coming weeks. We will be giving those away, which is quite exciting as they've only just hit the market. In terms of other kind of amazing walk-around things, the One Love machine band were there, who I was dimly aware of already. I'd heard of Collier before, and I know about the Mutoid Waste project. They're a collective from England who fled England at one point and moved to Germany. They were responsible for the huge aeroplane halfway sticking out of a building sculpture in the former East Germany after the wall fell. The One Love robot machine band look and sound just as crazy and clanky as you might imagine. I'll stick a little clip in here, but as always, there's a full interview with Collier on our YouTube channel. But yes, here they are. Collier is a really interesting guy, and I didn't realize he lives here in Berlin, and he's someone I hope to catch up with again at some point. I feel like, again, he might be a very interesting person to have a longer conversation about, because he is a maker in the truest sense of the word, but he's coming at it from a very machine-based and getting bits of steel and moving them around with pneumatics, and it's kind of a worlds away from the microcontroller stuff that we do. But then again, this is all MIDI controlled, and I didn't really have the time to ask him exactly how all that worked in our short interview, so maybe that's a thing for the future. Another notable thing was the Crane Wasp, which is a concrete 3D printer that's already being used to build houses all over the place. Concrete 3D printer, there's not much more to say, but it was very impressive to see. And Brillo, which was really quite interesting. Brillo is a robot bartender, but it's it's got two very extendable arms, which are very kind of professional-looking robot arms, and it can make drinks. But what's interesting is what's going on under the hood, because it uses machine learning, as everything does these days, to try and kind of get a read on the person that's coming up. It'll recognize them and it'll remember their favorite drink, but it'll also try to read their emotions and see whether they might be in the mood for hearing a joke or, just having a serious conversation or not speaking at all. Now, in the craziness of Maker Faire, we didn't really get a full sense of what it is like, but I've seen a couple of videos of it in quieter situations, and it is a pretty amazing project. Once again, we have a full-length interview with one of the team in the middle of a very busy Maker Faire, but I think it came across quite well. And speaking of kind of amazing interviews with teams of people, we spoke to some people who are taking the Obot, which is a low-cost robot face that can be programmed in Scratch and Python and all that kind of stuff, but they are repurposing it as an autism therapy tool. The idea being that there are already autism robots out there which allow very predictable relationship simulations, let's say. I don't know if I'm using the right terms here. And they're trying to make it much cheaper and make it work. And they're at the very beginning of their development stages of doing this. They've had a few trials with it that have gone very well. This is one of the ones where I'll say, if you do want to get involved in this project, there's a link on our blog to how you can get in touch with them. If you have any specialist information or experience in this field, they seem like they're really passionate, and they are definitely asking for help. We also spoke to Medea, who are making 3D printed orthotic inserts. And there's some really interesting stuff there. They're making 3D printed orthotic inserts, but they also have a sensor soul thing that will read your gait and help you correct your gait, as well as a phone app that can make precise measurements of feet so that you can get orthotics 3D printed and sent to you no matter where you are. I don't even pretend to understand how it works, but they're three very studied engineers who have come together to do this project. And just across the way from there was Special Waves, who I had actually come across before, but I hadn't actually seen them in the flesh. And these are completely modular controllers, and they were very keen to stress that the controllers for everything. You can use them as computer controllers, macro pads. They're even used as a hardware in one of the banks somewhere in Italy, I think. But for me, this is always going to be a music and VJing tool. The idea of a MIDI controller that you can just chop and change things on the fly, and they got a very robust software. I think it's kind of amazing. There's a short video of that as well on our TikTok account if you would like to see it, but also you can just head to specialwaves.com. We had a fantastic chat with Michele Gallucci, and I probably pronounced her. She told me how to pronounce her name, and I completely messed it up again. But she brought a smart glove project, which is using strain sensors and a microcontroller, and it looks as kind of crazy like robot tech as you would imagine. It's amazing. And it uses that to basically make a keyboard that can be a completely functional keyboard. You can type anything on it, but that you just need to do a few small movements with one hand to do it. So the idea here is that not everyone can use a keyboard comfortably. Whether it's injury, whether it's disability, whether it's a sight thing, even being partially sighted can make it difficult to type unless you've learned to touch type. Whereas if you only have your fingers to move instead of having to move them to specific places, it can be kind of easier to do. And what made this really interesting is the iteration she must have gone over in order to come to the key that you see behind her on the wall. We have a write-up and an interview with her on the Electromaker blog, and she's someone who I'll probably be talking more to about this project. I'm hoping she writes it up on the Electromaker website. She seemed very interested in doing so. I wasn't sure if she was coming to Rome as the start of a trip in Europe or whether she's back now. I'm sure we'll catch up with her fairly soon. And there's a link to that project and a link to her link tree in our roundup blog of Maker Faire as well. So that was Maker Faire Rome 2022, and it was a wonderful experience. It's the 10th year they've been running Maker Faire in Rome, and it's just one of those things that seems to go from strength to strength, because the event itself was fantastic, and it was well organised, but they made it in such a way that because it was a Friday and a Saturday, the Friday there was students everywhere. It seems like every school in Rome sent kids there. And then on the Saturday it was family day, and there was families absolutely everywhere. And what that meant was a huge amount of enthusiastic kids, and they were enthusiastic. The amount of kids that went away with ideas and development kits and just loved it, these are the people that are going to be showing up at Maker Fairs in the future with the projects that were inspired by what they saw this year. It really was a special event to be a part of. So if you'd like to see more, there's more on our YouTube channel, there's more on our TikTok channel. There might be some more articles and little videos and stuff when I finally finish going through all of the footage and photographs that we took. But yeah, we'll definitely be at Maker Faire Rome 2023. It's well worth looking into. Rome is a beautiful city as well. I'm probably going to get there early and leave late next year if I can, so I can see more of it. And there are Maker Fairs all over the world. We spoke with someone who was putting on Maker Fairs in Bulgaria. That's something I didn't even know was happening. And of course, there were bigger Maker Fairs in America. They've sort of stopped, but a little birdie told us that they might be starting again in a new format kind of soon. But in short, Maker Fairs are truly wonderful things, and I hope next year we can actually meet some of you in person at Maker Faire Rome 2023 and maybe have a little Electromaker meetup just there. But for now, that draws a line under Maker Faire for us for this year. And thank you once again to everyone that made it so that we could go. It was a truly wonderful experience. Now, it's time for yet another announcement of winners. It seems like this show is just entirely announcing the winners of things, but I guess sometimes that's just what happens when time lands the way that when time happens. When time happens. It is time to announce even more winners in this show of winners, and we're going to announce the winners of Electromaker of the Month. Now, in case you're not familiar, Electromaker of the Month is a rolling contest we have. Every project that is put up on the Electromaker website is entered automatically into this contest, and each month a panel of judges chooses their 3 favourites to win prizes. The first prize is a whole host of Nordic semiconductor development gear, and as someone who's played with most of this stuff, it's really cool stuff, and a $50 Amazon gift voucher as well. The winner also gets a bunch of cool Electromaker swag, including one of these rather swaggy t-shirts. Second and third place get that too, as well as a bunch of Nordic swag, which includes an NRF 52840 dongle. That is their Bluetooth Low Energy USB dongle that allows you to make Bluetooth Low Energy devices straight out of the USB port of your laptop or desktop. And again, all of these things are Nordic, so they all work with NRF Connect for desktop and the full suite of free tools. It's, really cool stuff. However, this month we have already picked our winners at the start of the month, but then we were away at Maker Faire Rome, and I'm only getting around to announcing it now. And without any further ado, here are the Electromakers of the month for September. The winner this month was Naveen with a TinyML project for snoring detection. Now, detecting snoring is not an easy task to solve from an engineering point of view, but snoring itself is something that isn't a joke. As it says here, and I was very shocked when I read this, treatment for snoring is a $4 billion industry, at least it was in 2020. And this uses a Thingy 53, which has an onboard microphone. It also has a bunch of different sensors on board. It's a Bluetooth low energy kit, which is a bit like the Thingy 91, which I've raved about in the past. And this uses edge impulse to train a model on what is snoring and what isn't snoring. By the way, if you want to know more about it, this is one of those projects where the documentation is just outstanding. It goes through every single part of how it works, where they got the data collection from, how it works. One thing that I do want to quickly mention, and I think I actually mentioned this in a previous show, because I think I talked about this project just when it showed up on the site because I thought it was cool. Evidently, the judges thought it was cool as well. The one thing I would say is if you do decide to follow this and do it yourself, it uses YouTube DL, which is a script for downloading YouTube videos. I would argue to use YTDLP, I think it's called, instead. Yes, YTDLP. I'm almost certain that I linked this in the description of last week's video, actually. If you do decide to follow this, use YTDLP because this is much, much faster. For whatever reason, YouTube DL just slowed to a crawl at one point, and I use YouTube DL a lot to download videos as MP3s to listen to them as podcasts because I don't have much time to sit and watch YouTube. Anyway, I got way distracted. Congratulations, Naveen. You are the winner of Electromaker of the Month for this month. And yeah, as it says here, the judges just loved that it's a practical use of TinyML. There's a lot of projects out there which show that you can do machine learning on tiny microcontrollers using platforms like Edge Impulse or Newton AI, very similar ideologies there. But to actually get something which is so close to being incredibly useful in a day-to-day way is a great project. It really is. And as I mentioned before, this is the said pile of Nordic Semiconductor stuff that Naveen won, along with a $50 Amazon gift voucher. In second is controlling your devices using Arduino and Personal Assist. Now, the gist of this project is using an Arduino Nano RP2040 Connect. That is the Arduino board, which, unsurprisingly by the name, has the RP2040 board in it. But it's also, it has connectivity in it. Again, in the name, isn't it, I guess? It's a Wi-Fi board with an RP2040 in it. It also has a few sensors on board. Not that these are necessarily being used in this specific project, but it could be. However, it also has a custom PCB, which the RP2040 fits into, and one of the things that's nice about this is that it can take an input power of anything between, I think it's 7 and 36 volts or something like that, which is kind of cool. And they're just nice little PCBs as well. On top of this, it works with the Arduino Cloud and it has Alexa integrations as well. It's just a very developed DIY smart home project, and obviously our judges must have thought that as well. And in third, and I assumed this would win one of the prizes this month, is the Jaeger machine. Now, I've talked about this previously, so I'm not going to go over it again. You can go look at the last show to hear me talk about it more at length. But in short, this is a Raspberry Pi 3 powered machine with a touchscreen on the front that will pour you a shot of Jägermeister or whatever your favorite drink of choice is. And yes, it will do that and look this good. And also, if you send it the right email with a coded message in the subject title, it'll pour you a shot of Jägermeister no matter where you send that message from. You know, just on the way home on the train, I would like a shot of, well, Gatorade is I think what I said, because, you know, I'm more of a energy drink person than a Jägermeister person currently. So yes, they are the three winners of the Electromaker of the Month this month. And as mentioned before, the two runner-ups, as well as getting the cool Electromaker swag, get some Nordic swag, including the NRF 52840 dongle, which is definitely not worth sniffing at. And this is going to keep going for the rest of the year. Every month we will be giving away these prizes. And the question is, will you be the next Electromaker of the Month? So that has been the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. There will be a couple of special podcasts coming up. As I previously mentioned, there are some interviews I have been recording with people, and they will be slowly starting to come out as time goes on. I just wanted to build up a decent buffer of them because I started quite quickly and then realized there wasn't really time to do many more episodes of that. So this time around, I'm trying to get it ready so that every month next year, we will definitely be able to release a long-form interview. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, if you would like to hear the Maker Faire Rome interviews, the shorter interviews, cut up into one long podcast episode with them, please do let me know. It's something I might end up doing anyway, but it would be nice to know if it's something that would be received well. As I said at the start of the show, rather than doing it in the middle, I'll just mention it now. If you would like to support this podcast, head to electromaker.io and take a look in our shop. We don't have sponsors. We don't run any adverts anywhere on at least in our content side of things. We really do just run on that shop. So if you're thinking of buying anything, be it a Christmas gift or a kit for someone or something for your next project, consider having a look there. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the show. I'll be back to chat to you next week. Take care. Have a good one. Bye-bye.